Hello, and welcome to the Kosh, the People's Podcast. I'm your host, Timber Smith, and the Kosh is a podcast that spotlights people who've had an association with the Kosh and the surrounding Fox Cities area. Also, this episode of the Kosh is sponsored by Sunken Paddle Cider Works, making the best of it. Once again, if y'all haven't had an opportunity, this thing we call summer seems to be trying to flee on us, and we're already starting to get a little fall-ish. By the time y'all actually hear this episode, we'll probably be well into fall. But with that comes the opportunity that maybe you should take one of your Saturdays and go check out Sunken Paddle and do the tasting of ciders. I challenge you to do that. It's a good time. Kosh listeners, as you know, it is podcast day. It is a beautiful weekend morning. Actually, this is the holiday. This is a long holiday weekend. I am excited about this because I'm not going to lie. I took an extra day off, so I'm stretching it to the fullest. Yeah, there is nothing like a long holiday weekend. I've got a game plan of things to do. None of them all that exciting. Some of them includes taking a nap, which for me is exciting, maybe boring to others, but it actually makes me super happy. So it's going to be naps and making hot sauce and pickles. Not for everyone, but things that make Timber super, super happy. All right. Well, Kosh listeners, I am really excited about this week's conversation, especially because this is someone who over time we've connected multiple times. We've broken bread together multiple times. And every time I feel like we share and we learn. We share and we learn. Like we're not necessarily cut from the same cloth, but we share a lot of values. And I think that's pretty sweet when you get to have those kinds of conversations with individuals that you might not get an opportunity to always have those conversations with because they're not in your silo. So this is going to be a really cool conversation. And you know what? More importantly, what I'm going to say is, and if you are a Kosh listener, you already know what's coming. You know what's coming. I don't know how I continue to get these amazing, amazing guests. And this week is no different. So, without further ado, this week's guest is Matt Tooke. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Timber. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. Beautiful day out.
It is.
I love the setup that you have here and just making me feel comfortable. And thank you for having me.
Hey, welcome to the Kosh space. It is a cool space. And it is a gorgeous day out. It's a holiday weekend. You going to do anything special?
Yeah, actually we are. We're going to get out on our bikes today.
Yeah?
And we're going to go down to Menominee Park and just kind of ride around and take in the weather. Going to go down to Madison tomorrow, my son, and we're going to meet up with my older son.
Is this move-in day?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but just more or less a get-together. And we're going to get out and do some hiking and just spend some time together.
That's awesome. Okay, I like that. And I actually already went to Menominee Park this morning. I decided that I was going to take Bosco, the podcast dog, for a nice walk first thing this morning at like 6:45 or so. And, he decided that he was going to be extra leisurely today. And him and this nose, I think he's part hound. Because that nose will take him everywhere. And he decided today was not going to be the day that he was going to stay on the trail. He was going to follow his nose. And I was like, all right, it's a beautiful day. Let's just go. So it was kind of fantastic. Okay, Matt, you ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Can you please share a little something about yourself and your connection to the Kosh and the surrounding Fox Cities area?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me today. We had the opportunity to get together a little bit and share lunch and kind of get to know each other. And I've had an opportunity to listen to a few of these episodes, and I've really kind of appreciated that this isn't a podcast where it's just one mindset. I really do appreciate that you brought in different opinions and different ideas. And so I just really appreciate you. And a little bit about myself. So I grew up over in La Crosse, which is God's country. It's beautiful. I grew up hiking up those bluffs and going up those coulees and those valleys. Yeah.
There's bluffs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you've been over to La Crosse, you've seen how the whole region was not hit by the glaciers. So it has a lot of terrain and different features like that. So I, in one sense, had a really cool growing up and a lot of time outdoors, spending time on the Mississippi, fishing, doing a little bit of hunting. Back in our time, we would do three-wheeling. Remember three-wheelers?
I do remember three. Do they still make those?
No.
Okay. Everything's a four-wheeler now.
Yep,
okay.
Yep. So, but, like a lot of families and different things, we had a lot of issues going on at home as well. And so on one hand, there was a lot of good things that happened, a lot of good people and everything. But in another way, I really struggled in a lot of ways. There was some issues at home. Like a lot of families, we had issues with addiction, some dysfunction, some different things like that. And it really kind of led me down a path of kind of struggling with my own identity and who I was. And I often tell the story of looking in the mirror, and I can remember a specific time looking in the mirror and just really not liking the person that I saw and feeling like I wanted to punch that mirror. And as I've gotten older, one of the things that I've done is I'm now a catechist over at St. Raphael, and I try to talk to young people a little bit about their identity. And I think too often we feel that our identity comes from the things that we do or the things that we have. And really our identity is rooted in whose we are, which is a child of God. And so I like to be able to kind of go back, in a sense, to a place where kids are in high school and really kind of struggling and help them kind of understand the greater meaning and purpose of life. So to kind of kick off, I thought I would kind of share a story, a couple of things that were really instrumental in my life and things that kind of shaped the person that I am.
I'm with it. I want to ask one question before you jump into your story.
Sure.
What is a catechist?
Yeah.
Because, I've heard a lot of different things, right? And I'm going to be honest. I don't know religion that well, except for I've had some years of Catholic school.
Okay. Sure.
But I've never heard that term before.
Yeah. So catechist is really just somebody that is a teacher of the faith. That's just kind of a fancy term. Some people might even call it a Sunday school teacher. But just somebody that volunteers their time to try to pass down the faith to younger people. And so it's sort of like a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know if it was something like, because it almost sounded like it was another sect of religion. So I was like, is this something that I don't know? It's like, I thought it was, well, I don't always understand like the differences between like Lutherans and Catholics and all of that. All right. I just know there's churches and praying.
Yeah. Exactly. So, Catholics, which is what I am, do have a lot of words that are kind of confusing. Mm-hmm. So that's just one of them. But so just to kind of get into a little bit of a story about what sort of makes me tick and some things that had a big influence on me. When I was 10 years old, I kind of referenced that I did have some troubles growing up. And when I was 10, my older brother, who was 8 grades ahead of me, got his high school girlfriend pregnant. And this was back in 1987. And what happened is there was a lot of talk about what they wanted to do necessarily, in this situation. And they talked about adoption and they weren't sure the way that they wanted to go. But my sister-in-law now had to walk through the halls of a Catholic school pregnant for for her senior year.
Oh,
Bruh.
Yep. And this was obviously very challenging situation. And on the surface level, it seemed like it was just ruining everything. And it caused so much turmoil kind of in the short term in our family. And we were all kind of upset about it. But, you know, over time, kind of the most amazing thing happened. And that was that once Mary was born, the family, which had some issues, really rallied around this child and rallied around this situation. I think that when there is dysfunction and different things going on in a family, you can get so inward focused on yourself, your own problems, your own issues, and you never really look outward toward others. And I find that the key in life is that it's in giving that we ultimately receive. And when we're very self-focused on our own issues and problems, we become unhappy. And so what seemed like such an insurmountable problem actually ended up being one of the greatest blessings for our family. And one of the coolest parts is I got to see the love of a child through the eyes of my mother, and really it breathed life back into our family. And so this was kind of a pivotal moment when I was younger, and kind of a bright spot that kind of painted my perception going forward in my opinions on certain things. So just kind of moving on, you know, as I got a little bit older, I fell into some things like drugs and alcohol. I was exposed to pornography at a young age, which really, for me, kind of led me into falling into kind of that hookup culture, you know, as a teenager and a young adult, and had a lot of negative impacts on me. When I got into college, then I went to UW-La Crosse. I was dating a girl. She also became pregnant when I was 20 years old. And so, again, life kind of repeated itself in a certain way. We had a choice. She had a choice to make. Seemingly on the surface, it was going to ruin everything. She was on her way to be very successful in life. She was going to a great college, and this didn't fit in anywhere whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, she ended the relationship with me while she was pregnant. And so for some reason that I still don't know today, and I'm friends with her today, but she decided to choose life despite all the odds, despite everything, you know, not in her favor. What's most amazing, you know, to me, is that despite all those difficulties and challenges that we had in the short term, I just can't imagine life without my son, who's 26 years old, and just a real confidant. He is a 2021 graduate of UW-Madison with an engineering degree. And just to kind of round out the story, you know, with my niece, is she herself is a 2010 graduate of West Point Academy.
that's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And my niece and my son, I can't imagine life without them. And so, as we've talked about, I am pro-life, and it's a very important topic to me, and it's really painted by my own personal experience. So, just glad to kind of have an opportunity to speak a little bit about that. And what is kind of cool is later in life, I was married about 6 years ago now, and my wife had 5 children, and I have 3. And so when we came together, we have a total of 8 children.
I think they made a TV show about this.
Bruh.
Like the Brady Bunch.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was kind of cool because then later in my life, I got an opportunity to really kind of put my money where my mouth was. And Christy and I were married, like I said, about 5.5 years ago, and our kids are a little bit older. They range now ages 17 to 26. So we have a big old blended family going on.
That's a lot of people in a short range.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that we did that's unique to us is we decided for the sake of our children that we're actually living separately and maintaining the homes that we lived in and keeping our children in the schools that they were in. And so what Christy and I do is we visit each other, usually about once a week. She lives about an hour and a half away, and it brings a lot of challenges. But, you know, it's often said that when two adults divorce, the couples, they set down their cross, but the children pick it up. And so
that's a powerful saying.
Yeah. And so what we wanted to do is have kind of the most seamless transition that we could possibly provide in a situation that the kids didn't ask for. Try to honor that by sort of seeing them through their schooling and everything. So anyway, I wouldn't say that that's for everybody, but that's what we've chosen to do.
I don't know anyone else doing it exactly like you're doing it, Matt. Yeah. But it does. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do family, though. Right? I'm a firm believer. There's just not like a firm right or a wrong way to do a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Like people have to mold their lives to what will work for them in their situations and their backgrounds and all of that stuff, right? And so, but I do want to say I'm really excited that you're here also because you are pro-life and that we can have that conversation here on the Kosh and to show like that this is a forum to talk to everyone. Mm-hmm. And I want to learn and I want to gain more understanding about everyone. And so, you know, and thank you for being so transparent about it. You came out the box with that.
Yeah.
Bruh.
All right, let me ask the next question. And we didn't go into what you do professionally. So I'm not going to go there unless you want to go there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you, because we ask this every week, if you weren't doing what you do professionally right now, what would you like to be doing?
Yeah, if I wasn't doing what I was doing right now, I would definitely be doing some type of foster care, or I would be more involved with young people in some way. In the past, I've done a lot of volunteer coaching, which I just thoroughly enjoy. I mentioned the teaching of a religious ed, being a catechist, and I just love to be able to connect with young people and show them that, hey, I was where you were. I was struggling with how I fit into this world, and that there is a greater meaning and purpose to this life, and that there is a mission for you to fulfill. And I just love that reaction. You know, when I tell young people that I really struggled when I would look in the mirror and I didn't really like what I saw, when I look out at the young people, when I say that, they look at their shoes, because our young people are hurting out there. They're feeling that exact same way. And I want to be someone that's at least supportive, at least offering an alternative opinion, the alternative to what this world is sort of saying, that it's about what you have and your status in life, that no, you're created in the image and likeness of God, and God has a plan for your life.
What do you think? You're very religious, right? What do you think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about religion? And I don't want to say all religions, right? Because they're all different, very much so. So I'm just going to be specific to you.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say that people that are religious are very judgmental, maybe even hateful toward people that don't share their own views, super rigid, kind of et cetera, et cetera. And, I think there are people definitely that have given that kind of impression. And, but when you're living, and I can only really speak to Christianity authentically, when you take a read of the Gospels, you see that he's calling out the powerful and the mighty. So the Pharisees and the scribes were the people of the day that had all the power and the influence. And you'll repeatedly hear him call them out. But what he's doing is he's going out to encounter people that are kind of on the margins or the fringes of society. And take, for example, the woman caught in adultery. And if you put yourself back in the first century Judaism, that was punishable by death at that time. And what is the line that Jesus said? Those who have no faults or sins cast the first stone. So we see this pattern in the Gospels repeatedly of Jesus meeting people where they are, but not being satisfied with where they are, but trying to take them further. And I think, for a Christian, that's exactly the way and the model that we need to be, is meeting people right where they are, encountering them, and if we can, showing them another way. But ultimately, everybody has free will. So just like this podcast right now, if people are listening to it and they take pieces from it, that's fantastic. And if they feel that it's a bunch of bunk, then that's okay too. So we're really pitching a different way of thinking.
Now, me and you have talked before, and I think I don't do religion. And my reason for not doing religion is the exact things that you just listed earlier with the myths or perceptions that people have, because those are perceptions I have had, where the hypocrisy of some of people who say they are people of faith and the level of judgment that goes into some of that. And then I can't square it. Yep. I just can't square it because, and my biggest thing is this, because I do believe in God. And I think we've talked about that. I'm a firm believer in God because the world as we know it is too engineered for someone to have not engineered it. That's just my personal belief. Like, there's an answer for everything, right? There's for everything that exists, there's a way to feed that thing, whether it's by plants or by prey. Even how your body is designed, like for everything your body needs, there's a body part that does this thing that you need it to do, whether it's your liver or your lungs or right. So there's too much engineering to me that something didn't, or someone or whatever it is, right, didn't do some engineering, right? My problem with religion is I don't trust the idea that this is something that was made thousands and thousands of years ago and made by man, which we're flawed. And what has changed over time? Like, because to me, there's no way it couldn't possibly be a huge game of telephone, where I say avocado to you at the beginning, and by the time we get over to the end, it's tomato. You know what I mean? And so I worry about those things, or those are the things that keep me from having that level of I don't want to say trust, because I have no problem with religion at all. And people who are in it, I respect them. I think, whatever's going to help make you the best person you can be. And if these guidelines or these faiths are the things that's going to make you a great neighbor, a great person, a better parent, I'm all for it, right? Because at the end of the day, I just want to share the world with cool people. Right. But I circle back around to the very beginning. I can't square that with religion. And that's my thing.
Sure. Yeah. And I could speak a little bit to that. The downfall is really the people.
Bruh.
Facts.
So unfortunately, it's people like me and other people that make up, the body of the church. But really, if you think about any type of organization, it's always been the same thing. It's always been, you might have a great organization, and I'll just take the United Way. I know they do a lot of good things.
Right.
But, where they fall down is probably some individuals do some things that don't live up to the ideals of what the principle of the thing was originally.
Absolutely.
And so it's the same type of thing in religion. And I do believe that there is something from the Bible that we can pull from that. And that is why is Judas one of the 12 apostles? And I believe that that's kind of the answer to show that there's always wolves in sheep's clothing. And we're never living up fully. I'm never living up fully. So one thing I do today too, and I take this very seriously, I don't come here like on any kind of moral horse that I'm actually, living this life, and doing this thing. I'm falling down all the time. I'm disappointing people I love. But all I'm here to do today is present people with a different perspective on things. So I agree. I struggle internally as well. I'm a member of a church, and I see it with my own eyes. I've had people call me out for some stuff.
What?
So absolutely, but it's a function of human beings and a human organization.
That's a really good answer, and it's honest.
Yeah.
And it's true, right? There's no way you're going to have some huge organization with all different personality types and all sorts of people in different places in their personal journeys and different placement of where their ethics are.
Yeah.
And not have some, call it misrepresentation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I would say this too, Timber. I did a lot of study on religion. A lot of the people that I love most in my life don't share the opinions that I have. So that's probably not a surprise. But I love these people. I would take a bullet for these people, so to speak, right? And when I had kind of a profound conversion at about age 37 or so, and I had this feeling, an intense feeling that God was real, but I was kind of embarrassed by it because I didn't know how to explain it exactly. And a lot of, for instance, my oldest son has an engineering degree, right? So he's a very logical, rational thinker. And I'm thinking, how in the world can I explain this stuff to someone with an engineering degree, a science background? Like, it's not possible. So I started to study the topic of how can we know just by using common sense, our own rationale, that God is real. And so I studied some of these different topics, and one of the things that I did study was the historic reliability of the Gospels. And that touches a little bit upon what you were talking about, the telephone thing, because at different points in my life, I had no faith whatsoever. And I remember seeing, it's funny, but the things that make impressions on you. I remember I was in the line of a grocery store, and I saw a magazine article, and it said, was Jesus really a real man? And that threw me into a loop.
That sounds like one of those The Inquirer covers.
I think it was.
It's totally Inquirer.
Right. But it's funny, in my young mind, I thought, well, how can we possibly know what was going on 2,000 years ago? I mean, you literally have supposedly monks transcribing by hand copies of scriptures over hundreds of years, and we're saying that, the original came out exactly the same as the final copy.
Right. Wait, there's no spell check on the stone tablet.
Bruh.
Yeah. So what's actually kind of fascinating about the internet age is a lot of these questions hung out there until the internet came around and became a little bit more developed. It used to be like in 1980, if you wanted to study some scroll, over in Ephesus, Turkey or something crazy like that, you would have to hop on a plane and literally go there physically.
Right.
And one of the cool things about technology is that this stuff is available online, and the research has really expanded on the historicity or the historical accuracy of the Gospels. And I was shocked, but they have thousands of ancient manuscripts of the Bible that they're able to compare from different eras and different parts of the world. And although some of the words are different, and there are quite a bit of small differences, none of the stories are materially any different. It's essentially just, a little ways of phrasing things are a little bit different.
Right.
So that was really part of my journey.
I've always heard that.
Studying that. Yeah.
I've heard that the stories are, across most religions, that the stories are really, they're the same and aligned, but who they might focus on or who the deliverer, the Messiah, the gospel giver might change, or the prophet, right?
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, the Gospels are, it's of Jesus of Nazareth. And from what we can tell from all the evidence, these were people that knew him personally, and they wrote biographies of his life, the Gospels. And St. Paul wrote several letters talking about him. So from everything I've found, I was actually kind of amazed that I discovered that it really does hold up to the scrutiny.
Okay. We went down a path. I'm going to bring us back. Okay. Because we're going to come back and talk about this more later. All right. But I'm going to get us to our first segment, because we've already been in for a minute. We were going hard. You ready for the first segment?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first segment is called What in the World is Going On With? And that's where you start with the phrase, what in the world? And then you tell us what's on your mind. So, Matt, what's on your mind?
Oh, man. I could not figure out what I wanted to do. I had too many. Okay.
What?
Bruh.
But I did kind of settle on one. What in the world is going on with potential World War III?
Bruh.
Ooh, okay.
So this has been a little bit on my mind, and this has been in the news, but with a lot of the fighting and things that are going on, particularly with Ukraine and Russia, and Russia's repeatedly said these are a series of red lines and different things that NATO should not cross. And it's been kind of amazing to me to see that we keep pushing those types of boundaries. And obviously I come from a faith perspective and a desire to have peace in the world. And I just have been surprised at our aggressiveness as a country and NATO as a whole. And one of the things that is kind of surprising to me, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and kind of in the wake of that, they made it very clear, whether or not we liked it or not, that one of their red lines was don't set up any kind of military bases in countries that are adjacent to us, which is kind of similar to what we have. It's something called the Monroe Doctrine. And so when talk came about that Ukraine was going to be part of NATO, we kind of knew that this was going to be one of those red lines. And so I don't defend, what Russia's doing by any means. I'm just sort of amazed at how deep we are in this and very concerned, to be honest with you. So that's what I wanted to bring.
Okay. I'm gonna let you keep going. I mean, my thought process on this, and I don't know if I know enough to know. I'm gonna, and I'll keep it high level because I don't ever like to act like I know something that I don't know. So I like to be real transparent. I just seem jacked up that Russia ran up in Ukraine, right? And I think they thought it was going to be quick and easy, and it ain't, right? And so because and here's my thing, and I understand where you're coming from, but I really feel like all of the other things that have happened after them running up into Ukraine is because of their actions, right? So there wasn't this unification of NATO prior to them going into Ukraine, right? Because then everybody was like, oh man, they just ran up in Ukraine. I'm going to join NATO, right? So if they wouldn't have ran up in Ukraine, those others, for the most part, traditionally had not wanted to be part of NATO, right? So my feeling on it is, at least logically how I'm looking at it, is they caused it. They chose to close the walls around them, not thinking that others would respond or decide to do the things they do, but they looked at their aggression in a threatful manner and said, I think we're going to get some friends on this one. Because if you'll run up on them, you might try to run up on us. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I would agree with some of your analysis there. What they did is wrong, running up in Ukraine, like you said. And I do not think that they had any idea what the response was going to be. So I completely agree. Where I would depart is we had signaled prior about bringing Ukraine in to NATO. And again, I don't agree whatsoever. I don't take the side at all of Russia in any way, but we did kind of know that they said, do not do that. And the other part of it is just how far do we want to push it? Some of the things that have happened, for instance, is there's been a couple of red lines, and one of them is NATO activity within Russia. And are we going to actually use drones and different weapons inside Russia proper? And we've kind of blown right over that line. And so I just see a horrible situation that Russia kicked off, by invading, but it was initiated because we did something. They said, don't do it. And how far do we push this? And it's getting a little scary. I think it's time for cooler heads to prevail.
I agree with that. I'm always for, if we can get rid of the war, that would be fabulous. Yeah. But, the part of the cooler heads prevailing means that, because I think Ukraine would take a peace deal in a heartbeat, right? So that means the other party has to decide that they're going to cool out. Yeah. And I don't see that happening. I'm just going to be 100 about that, because I just think certain individuals in their leadership styles and cultures of different places don't lend themselves to negotiating towards anything less than a victory.
Yeah. I know that Russia has signaled that they would come to the table. On what terms? That's the big thing, right?
Right. It's always, what's the term? Well, we'll come to the table if we can just take Ukraine. So
I guess my main thing here is not to support Russia in any way in their actions, but just where are we going? What are we doing?
Now, see, I agree. And I want to be careful how I say this, because, do I see the possibility of, and I don't want to call it World War III, do I see the possibility of a greater war? Yes, but I'm not as worried about Russia and Ukraine. I'm way more worried about what's going on with the Palestinians and like that. Yeah. There truly scares me way more because of all, not just because of Israel and the Palestinians, but all of the surrounding actors around there. And to me, that whole thing is touch or go. And if there's anything that would jump off, because to me, there's no stability in any of it, right? Like, with the Russia-Ukraine thing, I feel like all the actors know each other pretty well. That thing over there, no, none of that feels good. And you're talking about a situation where, if I'm correct, and I don't know geography all that well, but I feel like Israel is sitting in a space where there's a lot of people around Israel who don't like them. And then they're doing things that are leaking into other territories. And it's like, if anything scares me, that scares me, particularly because of the alliances that have traditionally always been there and who the players and actors who will have to get drawn into a situation if something was to expand and really blow up.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's kind of why I said World War III. I saw your eyes get big, but I'm talking about that as well. You know, what's happening in the Middle East is just unbelievable. And like you said, all the different players that are involved in that is extensive. And I don't see that thing calming down at all.
Yeah. Not even a little bit.
No.
So, all right. Matt, I agree with you. That was a good what in the world is going on with. All right. So my what in the world is going on with is what in the world is going on with dentists. Look.
Bruh.
All right. Let me tell you. you just, Matt, Kosh listeners, Matt just gave me this look like, where are we going, Timber? Well, you're about to go on a journey. All right. So right now I'm having some dental issues. There's some sensitivity going on. And I'm going to tell you this. I've got one side of my mouth at the bottom. In the back, I don't have any teeth. So I've had them pull my teeth because of issues I've had in the past. So I only have bottom teeth in the back, my molars on one side. And, which means I chew on that side a lot, right? And I already have a tooth back there that's, got a crown and root canal. And that's the primary tooth I think that I do a lot of chewing and pressure on. Well, I've started to have issues with that tooth, or at least I thought it was that tooth, right? And I was like, all right, it's not to the point that like one side of my face scrunches up or anything like that, but hot don't feel good and cold don't feel good. And if I chew anything too long, it's giving me that little tingly little jolt, like, hey.
Bruh.
So I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna go to the dentist, right? And I've been holding out. This has been going on for months. I mean, months and months, because it just wasn't to the level that I thought. I'm your typical man. I ain't listening to nobody. I've actually got to be in face scrunching pain to actually go to the dentist if I ain't got to. So go to the dentist. Finally gets to that point, and I'm just like, you know what? Or actually, it didn't get to that point, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be stupid, because when it does finally go bad, it's going to be bad. So I was like, okay, I got a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and call the dentist. So I call the dentist. And the dentist is like, all right, you can come in. We'll fit you in. If that's the situation, I explain what's happening. So, all right, so they get me in. Now, I've been going to my dentist a long time. Like, I've had the same dentist, and I'll even tell you, it's Dr. Groff. Love them. It's a fabulous dentist. And so, but I go in, and they get me in, and they're just going to look at this tooth. So, and this was like an early emergency, not the emergency, but they got me in. Get in. She comes, looks at it, and I'm like, she's like, where's the pain? I show her where the pain is, opens me up, takes this thing, taps it a couple of times, puts that cold thing on it in a couple of spots, checks a couple of teeth, and basically lets me know that the thing that I thought it was, which I thought it was the crown, that ain't where the problem is. She thinks it's the tooth in front of it, right? And I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. And I'm like, all right, I get that, but she didn't say it to me with confidence. She's kind of like, I believe that, this tooth here from the cold reactions is probably this tooth over here. You should probably, and she's like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, do you want to get it pulled? I was like, well, I ain't getting it pulled because, I only got teeth on one side. That's going to take away the other teeth. I'm not going to have any chewers. I need some chewers. She's like, all right, well, you could get a root canal done and, do the thing. I was like, okay, that sounds good. And she's like, Well, but we don't do them anymore. Huh?
Bruh.
You're going to have to go to an oral surgeon. And I was like, what? Huh? Since when? The tooth that they were looking at, they had did the root canal on and put the crown on. I've been going to them forever. I trust them. I love them. Like, because I don't like dentists. So for me to speak highly of a situation, because no one wants anything in their mouth, but I've dealt with them for a long time, and they have done right by me and my family. My whole family's been going there forever, right? But all of a sudden, they're not doing that kind of work anymore. And I was just devastated by this whole thing. And here's the funny thing. So the same situation with my mother. My mother's been having some dental problems also, right? And the same kind of situation, they give her these selections, and her dentist told her the exact same thing, that they don't pull teeth anymore, and they don't do root canals themselves anymore, and everything goes to the surgeon. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. What has happened? What's happened in the dental world that dentists don't, your regular everyday dentists don't do these things that they used to do? Because once again, I'm going to tell you, I know they used to do it because they've done it for me. And now that's not the case. And I'm wondering, is this a situation, right? So I'm super analytical, so I got to go through my analytical process, right? And I'm wondering if it's an insurance thing, like if you do those kinds of things, as the insurance gotten too expensive, so maybe dentists don't want to do that anymore. And so then, or just what it might be. So, Kosh listeners, if any of you out there are dentists, what's going on out there in the dental world, and why are dentists moving away from doing these kinds of things? Now, my only problem with it, and it's not a big deal because I've gone to this oral surgeon before and they're cool, and they are actually really close to my house. And so I don't mind going to them, other than I'd rather one-stop shop if I can, right? And I like the idea of my everyday dentist doing this because I trust them. So, all right, I'm off my soapbox. Thoughts, Matt?
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, the dentist. Oh, that is probably my least favorite thing. When you were talking about putting that hot or that cold thing on there,
Oh,
that is like torture.
it was.
Oh man.
But that's how I knew the tooth was messed up, because it wouldn't warm back up. Because like you're supposed to put it on and it's supposed to heat back up really quickly, right? And she put it on there and that thing stayed cold. And she's like, "Is your tooth warmed up yet?" No. And she's like, "Well, and then she's getting ready to do it again. And I'm like, no. Yes.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's just part of that whole specialization thing that we see so much in the medical world.
Yeah.
That, your primary can't hardly do anything except for refer you. Everything's a specialty, or I think maybe you're hitting on something with the insurance.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it was something I thought about because, I'm sure if maybe there's different levels to being insured as a dentist or practice. And like, if you do certain kinds of procedures, then that cost is probably a way more expensive insurance than just being, I don't know, a regular dentist. I don't know, right? And I say this all because I don't want to come across as I'm complaining about my dentist, because I still love my dentist and they're still amazing, 100%. But, if it wasn't for the fact that my mom had the same thing happen to her, and so that tells me like there's something going on out there, that this isn't a one-off thing. And maybe this is way more common than we know. I wouldn't know because I only go to one dentist. Well, now I'm going to be going to two. And maybe it is. Maybe it's just the need of specialization for safety reasons. I don't know, but I'm going with insurance.
Yeah, ditto.
You too. So that is my what in the world is going on with. Okay, next segment. Next segment is called 21 Questions. This is the opportunity, Matt, where we're going to ask you some questions. Not 21 of them, but great questions that might solicit 21 answers. So, you ready?
Ready.
What are you grateful for?
Oh man, I'm I'm grateful for my family and my wife, particularly. What I described to you earlier, how we do that visiting back and forth, that's not easy. She sacrifices a lot, doesn't have her husband around. And it's, I guess I'm just really grateful. And, there are second chances. I think that that's an important thing to remember, that in life, marriages fail, unfortunately, and things happen, but God's always got another plan, and he had Christy waiting for me, and so I'm grateful for her.
What motivates you?
Yeah, helping other people really motivates me. So I kind of talked about, I do a little bit of speaking at different things like retreats for different religious events. And I really like the opportunity to relate to people on a deep level. And as I've kind of said before, kind of show them that there is another way other than what the world's putting out there. So encountering people and having those real meaningful conversations really kind of recharges me.
What grounds you?
Yeah. So the way that I stay grounded is I do a lot of prayer. I do a lot of walking. I do a lot of bike riding. I like to get out into nature. Since my kids were little, and they'll kind of tell you this, I would always try to draw them out on a walk or some kind of physical activity where you get the blood flowing, get the stimulation going, and then just kind of see where it goes, the conversations and different things like that. So whenever I'm kind of feeling a little out of control, I like to hit the bike or go for a walk.
What does success look like to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, this might sound a little bit extreme or something, but honestly, success in the end is, being in your bed someday with your family around you and hearing those words at the end of your life, welcome, good and faithful servant. Because I truly do believe that all of us will have to give an account for our lives, and that we will stand in judgment. And I think about those things quite a lot. And that would be kind of what I would offer, I guess, for that. Yep.
What irritates you?
Oh, man. How much time do we have?
Bruh.
No, I would say betrayal or backstabbing. Those are the types of things that I find the most difficult to endure. People that you trust or someone you thought you could trust that turns things on you and turns the tables on you.
What scares you?
Yeah. Losing family members, losing relationships. I do truly believe, and I talked about this, that I have people that don't share the same ideas that I have, but that I cherish them. And it hurts me because taking a strong stand in this world, you will lose friends. And I've suffered through that. It's been very difficult. So that is a fear, definitely.
What recharges your soul?
Yeah, spending time with my family and spending time with my people. Like I said, we're going to go out to the lake tomorrow, my two sons and I. Just spending time out in nature. Also, as I've said before, speaking to young people, coaching, some of those things that I've done in the past really fill me up instead of, draining me.
How do you define love?
Well, I would put it this way. Love is, sometimes it's not a feeling. I feel like love is a choice, an active choice that we make every day. And it's really choosing to do the hard things for others that you sometimes don't feel like doing. And it's very often kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling, but more of a choice.
What is the most memorable life lesson you learned from a parent, a guardian, or a mentor?
Well, the most important lesson that I ever learned, and it was very important specifically in my life, struggling with my identity, as I said, how I fit into this world, was someone that I met who encouraged me to be myself at all costs, no matter what. Everybody, especially school age kids, we all have this sort of fear that if people knew really who we were at our core, they wouldn't like us. I was one of those people. And this individual took me aside and said, when you're authentically the way that you are and who you are, that actually people feel comfortable around you. Because when you're not who you are and you're kind of putting on that show, trying to be whatever I think Timber wants me to be today type of thing, you're going to be able to see through that. And it's going to feel like work when you're around me. And you'll come to find that when you're authentically yourself, that 9 out of 10 people are going to like you, and the 1 out of 10, it doesn't matter anyway. And so I needed to hear that it was at a specific time in my life where I really needed to hear that, and I was open to hearing it, and it made a big impact.
I got a surprise question for you that I want to try this out. So I'm trying it out on you. You're going to be the first person I ask this question to, which we try questions out to see if we're going to keep these questions or not keep these questions. And this question is this: is there anything in your life that you would like to redo?
Yes. Generally overarching, I would say that even the mistakes that I've made have led me to become the person that I am. Somebody that could talk to young people or sit at a podcast and talk about the things that I feel. But the things that I would change about my life specifically are those places where I've hurt other people. As I said before, I don't sit here as a moral authority by any means. And I want people to know that. But those things that I would change in my life are definitely those things where I've let people down.
Last question. If you could have a walkout song, what would it be?
Oh, man.
I'm going to set the tone.
Yeah.
All right. You are sitting, you get the opportunity to be in front of a huge audience. Let's make it in a stadium of youth. And you're getting ready to do the things that Matt does. Talk about the things that Matt talks about. What plays for you to walk out in front of these people?
Yeah. Well, I'll take it in a different direction. I would probably, Alan Jackson, right?
Country, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big time country guy. He does a rendition of How Great Thou Art that is so powerful. When I do speak and I do go out in front of people, I do talk about myself, but more or less I'm trying to give the glory to God, and I would want to keep it focused on him. But I guess if you asked me like 20, 30 years ago, I probably would have said like Smells Like Teen Spirit.
That works.
Yeah.
I think that's the real answer.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back. It Smells Like Teen Spirit. Yeah. That's a good song.
Yeah, exactly.
I get that. Okay. Love it. Well, you have survived 21 questions. Okay. Next segment. Next segment is called Word Association. This is where we say a word to our guest, and then our guest tells us what comes to their mind. So we have a tradition here on the Kosh. We always start with the same word. It is the word of unity. It is the word of family. It is the word that brings us all together, belonging, all of the good things, and that word is food.
Yep. So when I think of food, so first of all, my kids kind of joke that I said if I was stranded on a desert island, the foods that I would want are pizza, root beer float, and Doritos. So if they could arrange that. So many times on my birthday, those have been the items that have been there. So no, but I'm a huge pizza person. Actually, it was funny. I was listening to one of your episodes, but this came up. And my absolute favorite place to get pizza is Pizza King on Ohio.
Oh, facts.
Yeah.
Facts. Wait. They get us there. Yes, that is huge in our house.
Yeah. So not Pizza King on Murdoch, not Pizza King up
Wait,
in Appleton.
it's not the same.
It's not the same, right?
Those guys over there on Ohio,
They're dialed in.
they are spot on.
So guys, if you like that type of thin crust where you're holding it by the absolute corner and it's not breaking and it's standing straight out, you're going to love this. You're also going to love the sauce, right?
The sauce and the toppings. They put the right amount of toppings. Like they give you some toppings,
Right.
but not it where it sogs out the pizza or anything. Like they're dialed in. I like that term that you use. They really are.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you get these sausages like on some pizzas and you're like looking at them, you're like wondering exactly what is this?
Bruh.
I mean, over at Pizza King, you get the real deal, right?
Oh, facts.
That sausage. I mean, oh man, that's fantastic. So I get the same thing. I get a 16-inch sausage on the regular crust. And then the other thing cool that you can do is you can actually bake them at home.
Yes, we do. We do both sometimes, but we bake at home more. Mm-hmm. All right, we're dialed in on the pepperoni, pineapple, and jalapeno.
Yeah.
That is a fire pizza.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Is it less if you take out and bake it on your own? I think you save
$1?
Yeah, something like that.
It's like I think they charge you $1 to bake it.
Yeah.
It's dirt cheap, whatever it is.
Right.
And sometimes you just want that. I feel like those pizza ovens do a better job of kind of giving you that really crispy crust the way you would want it. And so like sometimes, but the way that we usually do it is because it's a ritual every Friday we do a pizza as a family. And so it's picked up early, it sits in the freezer, and then it's brought out for dinner. And it's like, yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Cocktail or beer?
Well, I quit drinking a number of years ago, but I'm going to kind of step back in the time machine a little bit.
Okay.
And have you ever had Gumball Head beer?
No.
So do you like hoppy beer?
Probably not. No.
But you know,
Bruh.
I know what it. Wait, I know what it is only because of like that's what people consider IPAs, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So my absolute favorite beer is a brand called Gumball Head. You can still find it in the stores and once in a while on tap at a place. But I love a good hoppy beer where you can get that aroma. And the Gumball Head's kind of unique too. It's got, I'm not going to call it sweet. No. But it's got some notes or flavors that just maybe put a little bit of that in there. So definitely a beer guy.
Okay. Shop local.
Yeah, super important. So one of my riffs is, during COVID, a lot of those little local stores got deemed non-essential. And, what a shame. We were kind of all funneled into these big boxes and like the number one, what would you say? I guess the biggest benefactor is probably Amazon and some of these big boxes during that time.
Oh, definitely Amazon.
Right.
Definitely Amazon.
Exactly. And wouldn't it have been better if we could have been a little more spread out at our local places? And so anyway, that's kind of a side beef. But yeah, one of the places that I really like and try to go to is Kits and File.
Ooh,
Yeah.
love Kits and File.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you go to Menards, right? Can never quite find what you're looking for. It takes you too long. You go to Kits and File, you get like the royal treatment.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's there.
I've done it. Like I've needed that particular nut to go on that screw, and I walk in holding it in the air, and someone runs over, and they're like, this aisle over here, walks me to it, drops me off, pulls the drawer out. Here you go. What do you need? 2 or 3 of those? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, every time I will pay for that service every single time.
I mean, and not only that, but they're like giving you little pointers.
They do.
I mean, you're working on a project, which I mean is a real headache usually. And they're right there. They got the knowledge and everything. So I'm a big fan of Kits and File.
I've never walked in there with a situation and didn't walk out with a solution. At worst, what I might have did was go home and grab the wrong thing, and then I end up going back again. So I've learned to just take things with me there and show it to them. So then they can be like, oh, okay, that's like a 7 3/5 or whatever, right?
Yeah, they always have the oddball thing that you need.
They do. They really do. They really, really do. Oh, I love that shop local. Okay. That's fabulous. Streaming.
Okay. Well, this is one of the more boring parts of my life. I try to not consume a lot of media. And, as a matter of fact, I feel like, we would all be a lot better off if we were probably streaming less and different things. But I do see a place for it. And one of the things that my wife and I have done is there's a service called Flix. So my wife and my stepdaughters absolutely love it. But this isn't for everybody. But hey, it's a little bit like Hallmark movie meets Christian movie.
Okay.
So people are probably not too intrigued, but
You know what this sounds like to me? Christmas movies.
Yeah.
And guess what we do in our house? We play Christmas movies all the time, year round. Okay. Love a good Christmas movie.
Yeah, I mean, the world is so stressful, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just want to really disconnect and, a suspense thriller or like that's just not what you're going for. You want something light, fluffy, uplifting. Something positive?
Well, yeah, and I like to figure it out. I like to figure out, okay, is he the hometown dude that moved back, or is she the whatever? And you piece it together, and how are they going to screw this up that they don't end up together? And then how are they going to fix it? Yeah. Like, me and my wife talk through these plots, and we love it.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. And it's been a cool thing. Obviously, it's not really my first choice, right. But it's a way that my wife and I can connect and spend some time. And one of the things you don't want to get into is you're watching TV over here and she's watching TV over there and you're kind of disconnected. So,
well, you got to watch some things together.
Yeah.
So Flix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Flix.
Cool. That's a new one. Never heard of them before. Concert.
All right. So we're going to go into the Wayback Machine here. And back in 1993, I went to Lollapalooza,
Bruh.
which was at this time, they had it in several cities back at that time, but this was the concert of all concerts back then. Anybody who was anybody was at that, and this was at I don't think it was the Target Center back then. No, that wasn't even there, but was up in Minneapolis. Alice in Chains was the big act. They also had other acts, Rage Against the Machine, Primus. They also had some hip hop. Was it Fishbone? But also I think it was Rusted Root. So anyway, that was kind of my first big concert. And back in the day, I mentioned Smells Like Teen Spirit. I was all about grunge, the grunge movement. Back in high school.
Okay.
Yep. So, Soundgarden, Nirvana.
Did you keep any of those flannels? I'm just asking.
I outgrew them, but I still love a flannel to this day.
I'm just going to say those are good soft flannels.
Yeah.
You don't throw a good flannel away.
Never.
Because once they get soft, it's like, nah. Yeah. It's got to get raggedy.
Right.
It's got to lose buttons.
Exactly. So, yeah.
All right. I remember that time. Last word. Diversity.
So, I would say a few things. And I'll kind of take it in a different direction, too. But, so what's cool about America is we literally live in the most diverse country on the planet. And one of the cool things too is one of the ways that you really measure diversity is, interracial marriages. And, I've done some traveling like in Europe, and different countries like that. And we really have something so unique in America. I think a lot of times we kind of sit there and beat ourselves up, but we have people from every walk of life, every culture in this country. Obviously, it's not always perfect by any means. Actually, it's got a long way to go, but I feel like we've come a long way. I would say probably the least interesting part about diversity, at least in my opinion, is the physical characteristics being different. And the way that I put this is, if you have a bunch of people from all different races who are raised in the same family in Fargo, North Dakota, that's not a lot of diversity. I think when we talk about diversity, it's really a function of culture and what different groups of people bring to the table. And as far as I know, the most diverse organization on planet Earth is actually the Catholic Church. We have individuals from every nation, and we are interconnected through the Vatican. So all over the world, we've got our hierarchy is people from all different nations. Here right in town, we have Father Lewis over at Sacred Heart, over on Knapp, 6th and Knapp over there. He's from India. Over at Father Carr's, we have sisters from Ghana. We have a huge group of Hispanics. We have, Spanish masses. And so it's really cool. You would think of Catholic and you think of probably a bunch of old white ladies, grandmas or something like that. And
Bingo.
And I think that was, I think there's something to that, at least in the past, but it's really changing.
I hope so. Because they also say in America, the most segregated time in America is Sunday morning.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
can believe that.
And
Yep.
so they said, and so that's the other part about it, right? And so I love, I could see both sides. Well, two things can be true.
True. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Two things can be true. All right. Thank you. That was good. Next segment. Next segment is called the Kosh Hidden Gems. And this is an opportunity for our guests to share a hidden gem with the Kosh listeners. And that hidden gem can be something that maybe everybody knows about, but there's these details they don't know about. Or maybe it's something we don't know that much about. And you're going to spring something new on us. And it's not limited to the Kosh. You can share this hidden gem anywhere.
All right. Well, here's, when I grew up in La Crosse, I used to go to my grandma's house and we had a little corner butcher shop. And I'm sure you know a little bit about Jacob's Meat Market up in Appleton.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. Well, you guys all know about Becks meats.
Hey, now I love a good meat raffle. I'm just saying, I love a good meat raffle.
But I love old school, kind of that local butcher shop feel where you can come and get a specific cut, custom cut, thicker, thinner, whatever you want. I just love the feel, the smell of it, everything. And so, yeah, Beck's Meats is kind of one of mine. And I did have one other. This has probably had to have been brought up, but Hughes, the candy store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know the Kosh. The Kosh, there's two families. Like you are either Oaks or you Hughes. Usually not both.
Yeah.
One or the other.
But like to my mind, like anytime you're going down into a single family house, you're going down in the basement and they've got a whole operation set up. It's just really a kind of a hidden gem and just such a cool thing for our city.
It really is. All right. At this time, we are going to take a brittle break.
Hey, Timber, this is Orson.
This is Yao. Hashtag
The Brittle Daddies. Timber, every week you've got some amazing guests, and we want to give them a little something for being part of your experience.
Let's give them the peanut brittle. It's bold and classic.
Leave this for guests who have something powerful to say.
And if your guests or listeners want to find out more about Share's Ghana Style Brittle, check out www.sharesgsb.com.
That sounds about right. And we're out.
Deuces!
All right. That is our Brittle break, and a big shout out to the Brittle brothers, Orson and Yao. Once again, when we have these Brittle breaks, we really do give our guest some of their brittle, and we do give them, according to the commercial, whatever the brittle is. And so this week's is peanut brittle. So Matt's going to try a little peanut brittle here.
All right. Yep. I just opened up the package. Looks good. Let me take a try here.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to tell you what's special. Do you know what's special about the Ghana brittle? It doesn't stick to your teeth.
Oh my gosh, you were right. That's amazing.
Isn't it? It is fantastic.
Oh man, this is dangerous, guys.
Oh,
That's some good stuff.
It's some good stuff, right? And they've got several different types. There's a pecan, there's the pistachio, there's a cashew, and there's the peanut.
No, I mean they're not kidding. It really doesn't stick to your teeth. I don't know how they do that.
Hey, all I know is once I crack a bag open, it doesn't stay full long.
Yeah, it's kind of got that like sweet and savory. It's almost like, you're kind of satisfying two things at once.
Oh, facts. Yeah.
So, very good. Thank you.
You are welcome. And we want to thank our brothers, our friends over there at Share's Ghana Style Brittle.
Do I get to take this home?
You sure do. This is their gift. They are gifting. All right. I just want to make sure that I put the opportunity out there, much like this amazing opportunity that we're having with the Brittle Brothers or the Brittle Daddies. If there's other businesses out there and you would like the opportunity to advertise here on the Kosh, please feel free to reach out to us. We can record those and put them together and come up with a segment for you, particularly local businesses. That's what we're looking for. We want to promote our local entrepreneurs here and share your amazing products with the Kosh listeners. So reach out to us at askthekosh@gmail.com. Once again, that is askthekosh@gmail.com. I'm going to call Matt out because Matt keeps looking at this brittle like, man, that stuff is for real, for real.
That was great.
See, you didn't see that coming, right? All right, and I also want to take a quick moment and remind our listeners that this episode of the Kosh is sponsored by our friends over at Sunken Paddle Cidery, making the best of it. So, and if you happen to be listening to this and it's Saturday, go take a visit and go do the tasting at the cidery. It is amazing. Just a really good time. And I don't want to forget the most important point. It's free. So I've taken a number of friends there, and all of them are blown away by these yummy Sunken Paddle ciders. Okay, so time for the next segment, Matt. And the next segment is this. It's my favorite segment. And that segment is story time. So this is a great opportunity for our guests to share a story with the Kosh listeners. So,
All right.
Matt, what's your story?
Well, so this may or may not be true, but that's not the most important part of the story, that there's a greater lesson and purpose to it. But there was a man that grew up in the worst kind of poverty known in America in the late 1960s, early 70s. It was in Appalachia in West Virginia. He was born, he had unusual intelligence. And one of the things that he did is he set his mind about he was going to make something of himself and achieve the greatest heights in the business world. As he grew up, as a matter of fact, he became one of the top business leaders in America. So one of the things that he did with his wealth that he had accumulated is he bought a castle in the south of London. And once a year, he would hold a party, and the guest list was like a who's who of people around the world. So it was athletes, it was politicians, it was news media, and sprinkled in there was just a few different normal people that the man had grown up with. And so the day of the banquet came, and the castle looked absolutely radiant. They had banners flung from the windows. As you go down the corridors, it's like walking back in time down a medieval castle. And as they rounded the corner and went in, they saw a big medieval-looking banquet hall. And they all took their seats. And the guest of the evening got up and he spoke. And he said, "Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. We are going to enjoy some fine dining, but once we're done eating, we're going to have a little bit different entertainment. Instead of music, instead of dancing, I've hired a premier Shakespearean actor to perform different scenes from different plays. And at the end, you're going to have an opportunity to do some requests." And so they sat down to a fantastic meal. And just as they were kind of finishing up, the actor stood up and he began to go through some of the great scenes in different Shakespearean plays that we're familiar with: Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet. And every time that the actor would finish up, the crowd would erupt with cheering and clapping and standing. And it was really going over really quite well. And just as the actor was kind of wrapping up, he said, "I'd like to take some requests now." And way up at the back, there was an old priest. And he stood up and he said, "Excuse me, sir, I realize that this isn't Shakespeare, but I really wondered if you could recite the 23rd Psalm." And the actor kind of looked at him, taken a little bit aback, and he said, "Well, I will on one condition." And the priest was a little bit taken aback. He wasn't expecting any conditions, right? He said that, "I know the words to the psalm. We were required to memorize them growing up. But I'll say it on one condition: if you, in turn, when I am done, also recite the psalm." And so the priest was kind of hesitant, but wanted to bring some sort of spirituality to the evening, and thought that this would be a good opportunity. And so it began, and the actor stood up in a very commanding, authoritative voice. He began, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And as he wrapped up, the crowd stood and they clapped and they cheered, and they stood and clapped like they would never sit down. He had given an amazing performance of the 23rd Psalm. But just as things were kind of winding down and people were sitting down, he said, "All right, Father, it's your turn." Kind of fidgeting with his napkin a little bit, he stood up, and in a deeply reflective and meditative tone, he began. And he said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside restful waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll not be afraid. For the Lord, he is with me. His rod and his staff, they protect me and comfort me. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He anoints my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And just as the priest wrapped up and took his seat, something profound happened. Nobody clapped, nobody stood, nobody cheered. It was as if they were kind of mesmerized by the moment. And seizing upon this, the actor stood up and said, "Does anybody realize what it is we've witnessed here tonight? they could sense something powerful happen, but they couldn't put it into words. He said, I know the words to the psalm, but Father, he knows the shepherd. And that's really the message that I want to bring, is that this world is broken. We're hurting. Things are not okay in our world. But that wasn't the plan from the beginning. In Scripture, it says that before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And also in Scripture, it says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper, plans for a future. And I think, if there's anybody listening to my voice right now that's going through some of the things that I've gone through in my life, questions of meaning and purpose, I just want you to know that all human life is created in the image and likeness of God, irrepeatable. So just think about that. There will never be another person with the DNA, the chromosomes, the structure that you have. There's never going to be another person with that specific set of gifts and talents, and that there is a meaning and purpose to your life. And because we fall into a fallen world, things happen to us. And maybe something happened to you. And maybe you're like me, and you used things that happened to you in the past as a crutch for why you can't get to where you need to be. And God wants to break through that. And I had to make a powerful decision about 10 years ago. I hit a point in my life where I had to hit my knees because I didn't know where else to go. And God is faithful. And I would ask people, maybe it's been many years since you've considered this thing, but to have a conversation and regain that vision that God has for your life, which is positive. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper. So I get a little bit emotional because, as I said before, when I speak to young people and I look out at those kids, they're not okay. A lot of things going on in our world. This sort of social media thing that has isolated people. Somebody had talked about, we're all delivered different algorithms and different things that constantly reinforce our own point of view, which drive us to isolation and sort of not seeing the other side of different issues and points. And so I just want people to know that if it's been a while, maybe it's been a long time since you've considered those things, that God is real. He has a plan. And in that way, we all deal with suffering and adversity in our lives. But if we know that there's a plan and a purpose, we see those challenges in our lives as being sharpened and honed for the next thing, rather than just meaningless. Because I don't know about you, but when life gets really tough, and I've been there, without God, I just don't know if I want to be here, And I've thought that in my life. And it led me on a deep journey of exploration to try to determine, is God real? Like we talked about, can we trust the gospel? I don't know. How can we know from logic that God is real? And what other evidence has it been? But for me, it's been kind of an amazing journey of discovery. It's been interesting. I think a lot of times we associate church with sitting in a pew and maybe half connecting, maybe not. But it's about so much more. It is about a personal relationship with someone that has your back, that created you, that knew you before he even formed you. And it's powerful.
All right. I'm not touching any of that because I felt the energy in this space and where you went with that. And that was...
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I tell you, we be going spaces in this place, right? This space, I tell you out there, sometimes what happens in this space is simply amazing. To just see people in their truth, their authenticity, and their willingness to share it with us. This is how we get to know our neighbors. Okay, well, it is time. Every single time. Love it every single time. Well, Kosh listeners, you know from that sound, it is now time for the topic of the week. Topic of the week is chosen by our guests 99.9% of the time, and this week is no different. So, Matt, what's our topic?
Can faith and science both be true at the same time? I guess would be a way to put it. Or does faith and science, do they conflict with one another? Is there a tension? If you believe in science, can you believe in faith and vice versa?
This sounds like a journey, and I'm here for it. Let's go.
All right. So this was a huge question that I had, and actually a really big stumbling block for me. I've talked about people I love and respect who are very science-minded, and how do I explain faith in a loving God and an abstract concept and all of this? And so I began to do a little bit of study on this. One of the arguments out there, it's actually referred to, you could look it up if anybody's interested. It's called the God of the Gaps theory. And what this basically says is that as science progresses and we start to understand more about the natural world and the processes, that as these discoveries occur, we have less and less need for God. That argument really took root in me and really kind of gave me trouble, because I thought, yeah, as we're kind of explaining things, you know, we don't have this need to just kind of explain the rest of it away to God, essentially. But as I looked at it a little bit deeper, I realized that that was really the wrong way to look at it altogether. And so I'd like to kind of go into that and flesh that out a little bit. So I'll give a couple of examples. And first I would just start out with faith is something that explains why, and science explains how. Both things can be true at once without competing with one another. And I'll provide kind of an example. If somebody was able to explain in great detail the process of photosynthesis, if we had a plant in front of us and they were able to explain from point A to point B how the plant takes nutrition, how the process of photosynthesis works, everything about it, we're really only scratching the surface and explaining how things work. But we're never really getting at that fundamental question that's actually more interesting than all other questions. And it's questions of meaning. And it's questions like, why? Why does it exist? And we understand the structure and the design, but who is the designer ultimately? And for what purpose? And so think about the Statue of Liberty. There's a couple of different ways that you could explain it. You could explain that it's a statue primarily comprised of copper. It sits on a big concrete base. It's such and such feet high, this dimensions, this much weight, and that would be correct. But to say something like it was a gift, it represents freedom and justice under the law, that explains a little bit more of the why. And so the two explanations are correct, both at the same time. And another example that I think might help kind of flesh this out a little bit more is the idea of, imagine that there was a caveman that came back and was shown a motor vehicle. And somebody took a lot of time to explain all the different fundamental parts and how the vehicle works, how it shoots fuel in and it drives a piston which fires and turns the axle of the vehicle. And after several months, fundamentally, this caveman was able to understand it. That still doesn't have a full explanation. You still need things like Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company to fully understand a motor vehicle, because ultimately you're left wondering, in whose mind was this devised? And where does it come from and for what ultimate purpose? And so it is my firm belief that science and faith actually complement one another because they're answering fundamentally different questions about the same thing.
Okay. No, I'm following along. That's where I'm at with it. I'm going on this journey.
Cool.
And actually, what you're saying does make sense. So yeah, the math. I mean, I'm going to say for me, the math is mathing.
Yeah. So there is that question, and there are also other things that I think that we can point to for the existence of God. And one of the powerful ones is, we have the theory of evolution out there that sort of describes how we might end up with simple organisms becoming complex. And I know that a lot of people find that as a stumbling block as well. And just one more idea to kind of posit for people to think about is we have certain things in our universe that have no intelligence and are not alive, but they act in a knowable way. And let me give you an example, like the elements in the periodic table. So these are non-living things that actually act in a predictable way. So all of the elements form because they bond with different molecules based on the number of electrons that are floating around. So in the same thing, with rocks and different things like that, what's kind of profound is you have something that acts in the same manner every single time, but doesn't have any intelligence or life. And when you see things like that, periodic table is a good example, but the universe is obviously under the laws of physics, which again begs the question, who's the lawgiver anytime you have laws, right? We have other things like the weather cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the oxygen cycle. Again, things that are outside of the evolutionary understanding that work on their own and achieve outcomes. And I think if anybody's struggling, with the existence of God, that was particularly powerful for me to see that, we're a universe under laws. Not only living things are acting in a certain way, but non-living.
So I'm trying to phrase this question, right? And I'm following along, and so in my mind I'm working through this question I want to ask, and I haven't quite hit it quite right yet. But it's along the lines of, like, I'm thinking like there's a lot of people out there who are able to be in both spaces where they are doctors, they're super science focused and this, and yet they have their beliefs of faith. And then there's those who just don't necessarily believe in faith, but I don't know if they use the argument of science. I mean, they can use or attempt to use the argument of science to say this doesn't work, or some just say this ain't mathing for me. This doesn't math for me. And this is a really hard question because I'm trying to figure out how to ask what I want to ask, but I don't necessarily understand fully what I'm trying to ask.
Okay.
If that's it, I'm trying to pull from these two different scenarios, right? And do you always think, maybe this is a way to ask it, okay? Do you always think that like that is the primary use of people using science to try to argue against religion and faith and those belief systems?
Well, not necessarily, because, like you said, you do have a lot of people in the scientific world that don't seem to have a stumbling block. But I think a lot of times it's a roadblock in our own minds. And I know it was in mine. If we can explain everything, why in the world do we need God in there? So I think it's more or less a stumbling block. But I think the piece that's missing, if you and I are just having a debate on what's more likely, that there's a designer in this universe or not, we can debate points and we can make rational opinions and things. But what's kind of missing is that relationship. And that's kind of where I was going with that story, is that ultimately I believe that a lot of people that have a real roadblock to faith have not tried to develop that relationship with God, and that it's the most mysterious aspect of faith, that the God of the universe wants to have an individual relationship. And it's kind of the mind-blowing thing that makes Christianity so unique and so different. The other being that God humbled himself to come to earth as a man and lay himself down for us. And so I don't know if I'm answering, but I do believe it's the relationship piece mixing with the knowledge piece. And sometimes one is happening and the other isn't, and vice versa.
So, like where we started in the original of the conversation, I already had, I already said I believe in God. My challenge is religions. And I also believe in having a relationship with God. Whatever you personally believe God is, if you believe in a God, right? And having that relationship. And maybe part of my also challenge is I don't think I like the concept of people trying to direct or tell you how to have a relationship with God, right? Because it's supposed to be a deeply personal thing, right? And I don't think I need a place, a structure in which to specifically do it, or specific ways to do it, or specific things I should say to do it. I just think whatever it is personally, and I do, and I have a relationship with God. I have these conversations that's just me and them, and whatever that's supposed to mean, and that is why. And if I can have that and feel fulfilled by it, and of course we're not all the same because others may not be able to do that or find that peace in it. But I don't understand why we need all the other things to have that.
True. Yeah, and I guess I would agree that it is largely a personal relationship, but so why do we need, a church and a building and a place and a membership and
Yes.
right?
Yeah, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But like seriously, in a sense I also understand it, like we're stronger together organizationally, and if we can find something to believe in and move together in a certain thing or try to solve certain issues together as a community, I can understand why it exists.
Well, I would put it this way, just from a Christian perspective, because I can't speak for anybody else, but, we're social creatures, right? We need community. And I don't know about you, but I need accountability. So that's where you find, your accountability is in your brothers and sisters. The short quip answer is that a reading of the Gospels, we see that Jesus didn't come here just to write a book and kind of leave us. He actually specifically says multiple times that he came to found a church. And as, kind of flawed as it is, but ultimately we need community, we need support, we need accountability. I think I'm kind of hearing you. Like, I think there is a tension there. There is a little bit of a struggle, but I think that's kind of the reason why, the formal organization. And also then it kind of keeps everybody on the same page as well. We have a gospel message, and but if you're believing one thing and I'm believing another and we're living differently.
And people because people do that all the time, and then all of a sudden they break it off and it's this thing over here, or they're utilizing this to I'll give you a perfect example in a sense. Well, maybe it's not the perfect example, I should. But it's a question that's always been on my mind. Like when we have these versions of the Bible, like if the Bible's the Bible, I don't see how all of a sudden we've got a King James Bible, because then that means King James did some things to the Bible to make it that Bible, right? And and I'm sure that's not the only, it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure this has been done multiple times in different ways where different entities have taken this scripture, this message, these life guidance points and have shaped them to do things that they wanted society to do. Or at least that's my assumption for the creation of them.
Yeah, so my answer there is the Bible was originally written in Greek. Actually, we think it might have been the very first copies in Aramaic, which was the local dialect. But Greek was like English. Aramaic was just kind of a local dialect. Anyway, so we have copies of the original Greek from different periods of time. But kind of to your point is there are bad translations kind of floating around. So what you want to do and what scholars of the Bible do is they'll read a line from scripture, but then they'll go back. They want to know, how was this written in Greek? So that you can kind of get back to the true meaning and what did that word mean? Greek, being a dead language, has its benefits because the meanings of the words don't change. And that is kind of a weird concept. But words in English and live languages, they change meaning over time. So anyway, a good biblical scholar is constantly going back to the Greek to draw out that true meaning. But to your point, yeah, there's a million translations. You know, the Catholic Church I can speak to, they will source. I mean, the Bible is incredibly footnoted. So when you go there, it'll say some ancient sources say this word or that word, or, you know, so that's kind of how some of that gets worked out. But that is something that you have to be careful of. You can't just pick up, you know, a Bible like at the motel or whatever, right? Or the hotel you're staying at. Necessarily.
All right. I don't know. Do they still give those out? I mean, well, they don't give them away. Do they still put those in the drawers?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah. So.
All right. Okay. Where else do you want to take this?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're not done.
Well, you know, I did want to talk a little bit about forgiveness. Okay. You know, there's kind of the meaty, heady part of faith, which is talking about translations and how we can know from logic, and there's stuff like that. But I've found, you know, the most important thing is to relate this back to how does this affect my life? I might be intellectually somewhat convinced. Some of your arguments are maybe valid, maybe not. But at the end of the day, I don't care. I want to know, how does this impact me? And so I guess since you've given me an opening, I wanted to tell a story of forgiveness. Because, and if you're not a believer, like, that's okay. You know, I have hopes that, you know, you'd think about it a little bit, but this relates to everybody. And you don't have to be Christian or anything. You know, it was once said that holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You know? And how often have we done that in our lives where we're over there turning our insides upside down and churning over something that happened to us, holding on to that, just like, I want my pound of flesh out of this. This person wronged me. I've been there. I've done that. We all have. And so, again, there's a line in the Our Father that's kind of, I don't know, brushed over a little bit, but it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And essentially what that's saying is, God, forgive me for what I've done in the same way that I forgive other people. And that's like, oh, crap. Whoops. You know what I mean? Because if you're like me, I tend to hold on to things at times, you know? So a little story, won't take long, but there was and this one is a true story. There was a boy that grew up in a real tough situation, and his parents weren't even together when he was born. They had already split up. There was an ugly court battle that went on, trying to establish paternity and custody. The mother then eventually got remarried, had a couple of kids, but then addiction and different types of dysfunction came into the family. The mother had to go away to rehab. A divorce ensued. And then it set off a series of unfortunate things in this boy's life, which include, living with a boyfriend and getting kicked out of that house, and sort of a parade of different places, living with an aunt for a time, living in an apartment building. And so as this boy got a little bit older, he became very resentful of the way his life was. And kind of in the background, the biological dad was kind of in the background there. He had visitation with his son, so he was seeing him every other weekend, and but it just wasn't enough. This boy really needed guidance, and as he got older, he got resentful and said, if my dad would have manned up back when I was born, probably none of this would have happened. His life, the boy's life then, as he gets into being a teenager, he gets into marijuana, alcohol, gets in some trouble. One day he kind of gets up the courage and he says, you know what, I'm going to tell my dad off. And called up his biological dad, and he started calling him by his first name, and, you did this and you did that, and maybe you should have used protection, it's really leveling some different things. And what happened then was it led to the boy not contacting his dad for years on end. So what the dad kind of did then was just kind of left the line of communication open. And maybe some of you all are estranged from a child. He would just send out things, positive things, pictures, things on holidays, stuff like that, just kind of keeping it left open. And one of the more powerful things that the father did was sort of give the child back over to God, with the idea that you give God a gift, he's going to give it back, right? So a couple weeks before Christmas, father's laying in bed and he gets a phone call and he sees his son's name on the phone, and he shoots out of bed. He's all these emotions running through. He's terrified that he's just going to get told off. He was even worried, that he'd get a phone call that something horrible had happened. So he answers the phone, and on the other end, he hears a voice that's really kind of contrite and kind of humble, and it's his son. And basically the conversation kind of went like this is, hey, Dad, I didn't want another Christmas to go by without checking in with you. And I realized over time that a lot of the things that I thought just really weren't true. And I wanted to apologize, and I want to let you know that I love you. On the other end of the phone, I said, I love you too, son. And that happened to me and my son, Jacob. And I want to encourage people in a powerful way. Sometimes we use things that happen as kind of a crutch or a built-in set of excuses as to why we are the way we are. And that, again, that's not really the plan for our lives, that there's freedom from that. And forgiveness is not a feeling. I think we get hung up on, I need to feel a certain way. It's actually a choice that we're making. And what we're doing is, by freeing that individual, we're actually freeing ourselves, because we're like wearing chains by holding on to that. And when we listen to the Our Father and we think about that, God meting out forgiveness to us in the same measure that we actually give it out to others, it's really powerful. So maybe something happened to you when you were little. Maybe somebody betrayed you in a horrible way. Maybe you've been kind of stuck on something, but I would just say, if Jacob can do it, you can do it. It's not a feeling, remember. And it doesn't mean that you have to be buddy-buddy with the person. But what you're doing is you're setting yourself free, and you're rising above that. And it's incredibly powerful.
Matt, you taking us places today. You are putting it out here. Okay. Is there any last things that you would like to share with the Kosh listeners about your topic of the week? Or is there any other topics down this path that you would like to do?
I think we hit it all, didn't we?
I think we covered more than you probably thought we were going to cover.
Yeah, definitely.
And there was power in it. I'm very interested to hear how our Kosh listeners are going to receive all of this. I think it's going to be really good. Okay. Well, that means it is time. Kosh listeners, you know when you hear that, that means we are going to start wrapping up this episode. And first, I want to say thanks to Matt for spending time with us here today and sharing what he has shared, being honest and vulnerable, being a great neighbor. Yeah, we're having real convos here. And then, Kosh listeners, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for giving us your minds and ears, for caring about another member of our community, making this a better place to live, being open to these conversations. You don't got to agree with it all, but you should listen to it all so we can learn together and understand each other. I can't stress that enough. You know that here at the Kosh, we are trying to become the #1 podcast in all of Wisconsin, and I can't do it without y'all. What does that mean? That means, hey, if you've got something you want to share, let us know. If you think we should ask some different questions, let us know. If you've got ideas for segments, let us know. If you want to be a guest, let us know. If you got someone you think would be a great guest, let us know. You can reach us at askthekosh@gmail.com. Once again, that is askthekosh@gmail.com. Also, we know we have something very special here in these conversations that we're having, but we think more eyes and ears need to learn about the Kosh. And how do we do that? Well, with your help, take a moment, give us a rating, preferably 5 stars, and fill out a review. Those things are the things that help more people learn about the Kosh. It increases our analytics. Better analytics makes those entities, those internet entities, put this podcast in more faces so more of our community members can learn about it. All right. So now on to the real work at hand. It is shout out time. So Matt, who you got for shout outs?
Yeah, I'd like to shout out Father Carr's Place to Be, just as an organization. It's truly unique. If you aren't familiar, I think, if you've lived in the Kosh for long enough, you've seen it, but I believe it's truly a unique place. They have men and women shelter, but it's so much more than that. They have volunteers that literally there's doctors and nurses and different people on staff that can help people that are in transitional situations without housing. Can you imagine living on the streets and you got a toothache, for instance? I mean,
you went right to the place, huh?
Yeah,
You just made my tooth tingle just a little bit bringing it up.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, they have a full staff. They have dentists and different things like that. And they also have mentors there. They have everything that an individual would need if they wanted to get plugged in with interviews or resources or different things. So Father Carr's Place to Be.
Okay. That's your only shout out?
No. Well, thank you.
No, you take all the shout outs you want.
Yeah. I would like to just shout out a few businesses that are in the Kosh. If you're having trouble with your garage door opener or your garage door in particular, Carpenter Overhead Door is a solid place to go. If you're having issues with plumbing or anything, my neighbor Randy will get you hooked up. He's with R&R Plumbing. These are all good local businesses. And if you're having issues with HVAC, Christensen has never done me wrong. And the last, I did want to kind of give a shout out to my daughter Anna. And her and I, I would hope that we would have a better relationship. We've had some struggles in the past, and I just want her to know that I love her and I have her back, and that I think we have good things for our relationship in the future. So shout out to Anna.
Facts. I love that. Okay. My shout outs for this week. I want to send a special shout out to Amber. Amber, thanks for doing lunch with me this week. I love your podcast that you and your friend are producing. I'm going to try to be helpful. We'll share more about that in the future if I get an opportunity to be helpful with that. Send a shout out to my friend Donna. Donna is a good friend who she's in the space of learning how to read tarot cards. And so she's along this journey, and I'm like, come read my tarot cards, Donna. I'm going to let you practice on me. So we meet once a month, and she reads my tarot cards. I'm just trying to get it where there's the way that it's communicated across has a certain level of professionality about it. And, it's a thing. So I truly respect where she's going with that. I'm wishing her the best on her tarot card journey. I want to send a shout out to Kristen and the People of Progression team. I got an opportunity to go to their open house. They had an amazing open house. What Kristen and her team at People of Progression are doing for the community and how they're assisting and being advocates for the Black community. What they're doing is just amazing. And the level of service they're providing we are so lucky to have them in our region doing the things they're doing. And that open house was fire. And a shout out to the community for showing up to the open house, because everybody and their mother was there at that open house on all levels. Other organizations, government, the police, people came to support. And I'm really proud of being part of a community who understands the importance of an organization who does Black advocacy for our members of our community. Special shout out to my partner in crime, Andy, at work, always. To my boys, Sean and Tarman, always. And last, never ever least, big shout out to my wife, who continues to let me make this podcast in the house. I love you, baby. All right. Now, you got one thing left to do, Matt, and that is this. You got three choices. Choice one. You leave the Kosh listeners with some parting words of wisdom. Option two, you can tell us, what would yourself today tell 13-year-old Matt? Or option C, or three, and that is you can do both, like good multiple choice. What are you going to do?
Just some parting words of wisdom. Yeah, I would just, I tell my son this a lot, in that whenever he feels like life's getting a little bit out of control, that, the formula is always kind of the same. In our modern world, we're so plugged into screens and consuming media, and we literally live in a world where from the moment our alarms go off, we've got, music in our ears to driving in the car. It's just nonstop. What the human mind really needs is a disconnection from a lot of that stuff, a lot of that voices, a lot of that noise, to be honest with you. And you need more human connections. And so I encourage everyone to kind of look at that, look at your media consumption. And when life feels like it's out of balance, take a look at that. Unplug, give that friend a call your parents, get out there, get some exercise. There's a whole world out there. As we've said a lot on this podcast, we're not as divided as we really think we are. I feel that we're pumped that message of division from people above us that benefit from us being distracted and divided between just regular people. If you think about it, the fight in the world is not between two regular people going to work or two neighbors or Timber and I, just because we maybe have a different opinion. There are people who are invested in dividing, because if we all paused, our neighbors and everybody, and looked at what was going on in the world and took a look at some of the bigger issues, we would become united around those things. So unplug is my word of advice.
Facts. All right. Matt, what'd you think?
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bakash.